Greetings, African people. I am struggling with this cold. Hope you're all doing well and staying safe. Someone asked me a question yesterday, and as I was answering or attempting to answer, providing that person with my opinion, it really hit me because I think it was a really good question, and I think there is so much to say about that. Now, I want you to tell me if you notice a difference and what is your explanation for that difference. The question was, why does Black people in Canada have a different attitude towards Africans than Jamaicans in America? Wow, that's a very good question. I've never heard that question before. And I had to think deeply about it. And here's my answer. History always have a lot to do with how we are as a people. It goes beyond race. You know, history always comes back to remind us of who we are. Now, let's start with Jamaica. I'm a proud Jamaican. It's in my DNA. It's in my mind. I live, eat, breathe, sleep Jamaica. But I want to say that Jamaica was a colony of Great Britain. Jamaica is still a colony of Great Britain. Don't let anybody fool you. We're still colonized. Nobody's running out and grabbing anybody and putting them in chains, physical chains anymore. But we're not a free people. And I'm here to say, as is the case with bleaching, our mindset is what we have to deprogram. Even the most educated person in Jamaica is very much still enslaved in their mind. From the very top to the very bottom, a small percentage of Jamaicans who live in Jamaica and who now reside in the different diaspora across the world are liberated in their mind. Very few. I'm not saying that I'm liberated. I am seeking liberation. So if an African is asking me this question, why is Jamaicans this way? Why do they treat Africans this way? My answer to you is, when you understand that we were first colonized and understand that under the system of independence, we are still governed by the Queen of England. If you understand how religion was introduced to people in Jamaica or people who came from Africa, people have all kinds of explanations. Some people say, oh, you know, Black people are always in the island. It's debatable. Just using what I'm taught in school as my base, that we came to Jamaica through the transatlantic slave trade, then I'm going to hold on to that for now. Brought through on the slave ships, introduced to the plantation, taught to leave their language, taught to leave their customs and traditions behind. Of course, there's always rebellion. There's always a rebellious few. Very few people are rebellious. Some people show aggression and we say that's rebellious. No, rebellious is in the spirit. It's not in the physical being. It's in the spirit and manifests itself sometimes physically. So these enslaved people, because we are not slaves. Black people are not slaves. If you say you're a slave, then you would have to be born with that kind of legacy. African people weren't born as slaves. People grabbed them and forced them into bondage. Now, the enslaved people in Jamaica, everything that make you who you are, your culture, you know, your heritage, your spirituality, all that was ripped away from the Africans. And to this very day, most of the people who are in Jamaica are enslaved in their mind. You still hear the story, anything too Black, that's not good. Therefore, after many, many years, hundreds of years of this kind of indoctrination, The people now believe that anything that is too black is not good. Anything that is associated to Africa is not good. It causes shame and degradation in the eyes of people who were told that this is who you are, this is your reality, this is where you came from. And now we have liberated you, we have given you freedom. All the freedom and liberation we get, we are told that these freedoms and liberation are given to us by white folks. That is this whole idea that you gain your freedom from former colonizers, the very ones who held you in bondage, make you have no choice but to have that sort of thing where you love those who captured you. There's a saying for it, Stockholm syndrome. You end up falling in love with individuals who held you captive because, you know, everybody has good and bad sides. So we see the positive side of individuals who have the former colonizers. You see the negative sides no more because you're not seeing that physical harm, except when you look and see systematic racism, or when you look and see, you know, brutality towards African people. But Jamaicans now, having grown up with this heritage and this legacy and this, you know, information that Africa is where they came from. Africa is where the slaves come from. So we're not looking at ourselves like people now, you know, we are thinking, well, those people who came from Africa were slaves. Therefore, Africa is filled with slaves. So the Jamaicans that leave from Jamaica and come to Canada now enter a space where the mindset is a bit different. When you come here, you hear that Canada, through the Underground Railroad, allow people to cross over to freedom, a sense of liberation. So now you're not thinking that Africans are slaves. You're thinking that African people were taken and brought to United States through different ports, and Canada allowed them to escape and come here and be free. So you see this space as a place of multiculturalism. You see this place as a place of freedom. But when you leave from Jamaica with that brainwash, that whitewash mind, and you go to the United States where there is great oppression, where it's very obvious, not just systematic racism, but it's open in the open. There are places in the United States where you still have people telling you, go back where you come from, and say, calling your names, you know, broad. You see little kids saying, I can't play with you because you're black. It's still very much alive and well there. And now you have a president who makes it very clear that anybody who's not white is really inferior. So Jamaican people leaving the Jamaican space, go to the United States, and when they meet Africans there, they don't want to be reminded of that history. They have been so indoctrinated, and it's almost like a spiritual thing, being ripped away from your place and now being introduced to people who come from there. It's almost like some kind of torture, for lack of a better word. Black people coming here to Canada, you know, a place that is more conservative, a place where racism is not something that is celebrated, a place that is saying, come with your religion, come with your language. That's not to say that there are not people here who are outright racist and who do things to undermine and discriminate people based on these different variables. But you get the feeling that you're allowed to be here and you're allowed to celebrate your heritage. You're allowed to celebrate your differences. That's not to say they are not individuals who are of the same mindset. They are not individuals who came from Great Britain with that old philosophy that we are inferior. They're here, but they're not celebrating all these thoughts openly. In America, they are. So you come from Jamaica with an enslaved mind, and you enter the American space, and you start to encounter or interact with other persons who are from Africa or other Caribbean region. You come with that prejudice. It's the same thing as Jamaican people sometimes thinking that they're better than other Caribbean people. We call them small island. That whole term, small island, you know, set us up as saying we are better. Now, I do admit that there are some awesome people from Jamaica. I think we are talented. I think we are individuals who, you know, perhaps because we spring from a Bogle or Marcus Garvey or some of these freedom fighters, some of us are fierce. And so wherever we go in the world, this kind of fierceness comes out. That fierceness is not to harm anybody, but that fierceness is to say, I'm here in this space. I want to live with you in peace. If you disrespect me, however, I'm not going to accept it. So this is a long-winded answer, pretty much trying to say the attitude that we were brought up with, forced to just shun everything that mark who we are as African people, and then going into a space where you see racism so rampant, so clear, no line of demarcation. It's just right there for you to contend with. The broken spirit and the broken mind will more than likely try to side with those who they see as powerful, which would be, you know, the former slave masters. They would adopt their principles. You know, sometimes people say the house slave and the field slave. Well, the house slave would be someone who says, let me eat what the slave master eat. Let me wear what the slave master wear. Let me defend the slave master. The field slave now would be those few people who believe that Africa is their home. Africa is their heritage. And everything that is African is what defines who they are. And perhaps depending on the colonized people or the place that colonized them, or the work that they have done to rein them in, the kind of branding that they got. Because if you got branded with a hot iron and on your skin, it's no different from when you get branded with a hot iron on your mind, in terms of religion, in terms of, you know, breaking your spirit. So yes, I agree. Jamaicans have a very negative view of Africans, the majority. And intelligence or intellect or education has nothing to do with changing that. Very few, very few. I'm ashamed to admit it, but it's the truth. And I think the climate in which we enter, depending on how those individuals treat us as immigrants, we will more likely pull away from that heritage, or we might move closer to it if you are in an environment that is conducive to you appreciating who you are as African. Hope that wasn't too complex. Tell me what you think, people. Do you agree? And do you agree that there's lots of work to be done, that our people, our Jamaican families around the world, are free physically, but mentally are quite enslaved? Be blessed, African people. Think on these things.